Okay, so we've been talking, for a long time we've talked about the traditional pillars of tourism and construction on the Gold Coast, and we're starting to see the maturity of these new and emerging sectors arrive. Could I get them up, start with you, Shay, to just to start talking about the maturity of the manufacturing sector in your instance on the Gold Coast and what you're expecting in the future?
Thanks, Dan. There was a lot of stats that were thrown at us just now, but I just wanted to take a second and think about one of the stats that was up there. The manufacturing industry on the Gold Coast is delivering $8 billion worth of product every year, and $4 billion of that is getting exported. And just to put that into perspective, we're up at about the $20 billion for the state and about $16 billion export for the state, give or take. So thinking about that from a Gold Coast perspective, that is massive. $4 billion worth of Gold Coast manufactured products are getting exported to the world. Now, I think that just speaks volumes about the size and complexity of the sector that we have here on the coast. And a lot of the challenges that you spoke about is what we're hearing from manufacturers. It's really about they've got the orders and they want to scale, but there are some challenges to do so. So lack of skills is one of the biggest challenges that we're having. Also lack of space. That's one of the challenges that we have on the coast, is that designated space, strategic space for manufacturing growth we don't necessarily have enough of it down here. So those are probably the two things that we're hearing, but it's certainly not lack of orders, that's for sure.
And we might talk a little bit about COVID stuff for manufacturing in Australia in a minute, but Chris, did you want to just explain for people in the room who aren't aware of what's going on in the biomedical space on the Gold Coast?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think the reason why a lot of the people in the room probably don't understand the industry is because if we go back 2 decades, sounds like a long time, but if we go back to the year 2000, there was no biomedical technology industry on the Gold Coast at all. I know this from personal experience, started a PhD back at that time, and out of that PhD actually didn't have a lot of places to go. There weren't a lot of jobs in that industry. If we fast forward to today, I'm really pleased to say that out of the Gold Coast, this is quite remarkable, but Gold Coast researchers have invented the world's first drug for viral-induced arthritis. It's available to patients now as of 2021. It's been commercialised by an Australian-listed company, and that's all been driven out of here, out of the Gold Coast. The invention came out of our Gold Coast laboratories. That's just to put into context for you that we've come from a zero industry just 2 decades ago to an industry today where we're actually inventing and developing our own drugs and vaccines. What's really important though, I think, Dan, is what's underpinning that, the entire supply chain that is at this point in time still maturing on the Gold Coast, but is developing quite quickly. I know Evelyn Terralongo's in the room. Clinical trials is an absolute key component of pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and also the medtech industry, where we need clinical trials to actually validate and prove up those technologies before they're available on market. But also, and this is really key, I think, from an infrastructure perspective, is the vision of the Queensland Government at this point in time around the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct, and their vision to establish the enabling infrastructure we need there to continue to drive the biomedical technology industry. So there's just a couple of things to begin with.
Yeah, that's perfect, Chris. I think what we're hearing here is these sectors are growing and considered to continue to grow over. Nick, talking about growth sectors, there's obviously been a lot of positive announcements over the last year for space on the Gold Coast. For those uninitiated, you want to take us through those quickly?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure I can cover all of them, but the long story short is that we've seen an explosion in the support for space, not just in the Gold Coast and in Queensland, but across Australia in general. So 3 years ago when I moved here from the US, there either wasn't a space agency or it was very much in its infancy. There was not a space force, and those two major changes has shown the shift from the federal government in space as a priority. So fortunately, our founder, Adam Gilmour, saw that coming and was one step ahead of the game. We now have a 33-ton orbital launch vehicle sitting in a shed in Helensvale right now, getting ready for launch either later this year or early next year. So yeah, we're ready to go.
And I think one of the interesting parts, especially around the federal government funding, is not just been what will happen with Gilmour, but the attraction of other organisations as well.
That's it. Yeah, we don't consider our suppliers real suppliers. We consider them technology development partners. So we want to work with them to take their technology and advance it to the point that it's been to space, potentially successfully returned from space, and now they're a space qualified supplier for anyone in the world, really.
Thanks. And Nathan, I first heard you talk at the ICT forum last month, and I was fascinated by your journey in blockchain. Do you want to talk a little bit about your company and what you see coming in the future?
Sure, thank you. So so we started the blockchain journey back in 2017, and we came from the industry side of things. So we weren't an educator by any means. I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to write curriculum or anything like that. But what we realised is we were starting a blockchain company. We got bad advice. There's a big gap in the market, and that gap in the market's being seen across every industry by the sounds of it and by everything we've seen today. But what we saw is there was no standards at all, because when you talk about emerging technologies, they're emerging, there's no expectation that there's a benchmark or a standard to be measured against. And we took it upon ourselves to solve our own problem first as an industry like body, as a company, to see if we could create a benchmark, because there was nothing around the whole world. So we actually created the world's first advanced diploma of applied blockchain, which is the business application of blockchain, not the technical side. And then that's evolved into now a diploma of applied blockchain, and then we've since recently got approved the diploma of applied blockchain merging machine learning and AI. And where this goes from our perspective is the way business is evolving is it's rapid, and the emerging tech sector generally, all the emerging technologies, when you talk AI, Internet of Things, and all of these connected devices, Web3, Web4, is all looking through. What we have to start looking at is business models through the lens of use of emerging technologies, not just bringing legacy business forward, because legacy business caused the problems we have today, but not necessarily solving the ones we're going into. And so if we can look to the future and start building businesses integrating emerging technologies, then half of the problems that we face around skills shortage and gaps, a lot of this stuff is going to get automated out anyway to some degree, and people's capabilities, creativity and skills can be applied to then the area where machines, computers and systems can't process. So we get better business, better creativity, more fulfilling roles, because let's face it, no one wants to do hamster wheel type operations. So so it's been fun, and it's every day is a new day, and there's a lot going on.
Thanks, Nathan. So I think we've established that there's serious growth in these sectors, but this is the Regional Jobs Committee event, so let's talk about jobs. I might start with you, Nick, because I know you're in the market at the moment for all sorts of people. Can you describe to us the challenges that you're having in terms of accessing the people that you need to continue the trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I might just mention, so we've recently passed the 150 full-time employee mark. We have about 155. Carly will give me the exact number if she knows it. Nailed it, good. We have currently 50 open jobs on our website alone. Behind the scenes, we're contemplating adding another 50 on top of that. We're just not ready to flood the team with resumes at this moment. We just can't get enough capable individuals into the team. And I want to emphasize that we don't necessarily need space experience. We have enough space experience on our leadership team that we can bring in really highly motivated individuals who want to do something greater than themselves with their career, with their life, and we can upskill them in whatever the technical aspect is. Like, we have enough critical mass at our company now that if you have some fundamental welding skills, but you have the right attitude, culture, desire to work really hard, we are happy to have you in the door, and we'll teach you the more maybe specific welding skills that are involved with welding a rocket together.
Yeah, thanks. And Shay, we've had many because it's the same kind of issues in the manufacturing sector, and we've had some conversations about how manufacturing will support just not the jobs now, but how do we get the workforce of the future as well?
It's such a complex problem that we have. And fundamentally, one of the things we've been struggling with in manufacturing is that perception around it being dirty, dull, and dangerous. It's a little bit different in space. That's pretty sexy, Nick. So you guys don't have that problem, but you've still got a challenge with getting the right people into those positions. But first and foremost for us, it's about showing our young people that this is a really exciting pathway, that it's a career journey, and that they will be moving throughout their career, and manufacturing can actually be quite an adventure. One of the other things that I think we need to do too is look inward to ourselves as businesses. Some of the challenges that were outlined in that presentation are around people moving and losing that skill set. And I think that's an old school mentality that we need to cut away. Jobs will change, people will change, careers will change. The next generation will move through 8 different careers. So we need to design our organisations to be agile and adaptable, to expect people to leave. We want them to move on, we want them to grow, and we want them to have an exciting career. And I know that that's a selfless approach and it can be very challenging in business, but we need to set up the structures and the systems and processes to help them to fly. And so I think holding on to that old adage of, we've trained them, I've invested in them, therefore I own them, is just not going to serve us in the future. So that's one of the things that I think. But when it comes to school pipeline programs too, I do a lot of work in this space because I really believe it's a strong foundation. It only takes one experience with a young person to get them passionate about something. So getting them out into industry, showing them what blockchain is, showing them what space is. Like, I've taken a few people through Gilmour, and you guys are awesome at opening your doors just because a young person was interested. So I think as humans, we can help to connect those in our networks, our friends' kids, our colleagues' kids, and help them to get into industry. Sometimes it's just about making that human connection, and we just as individuals can do a lot to connect young people into work as well.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things that came up over the last year was some innovative approaches that companies are taking to attracting people and almost developing relationships with potential workforce, not just always putting out the seek employment. You know, we've got a job, but almost developing relationships in advance, which kind of seems like a really important element, so that when the jobs do pop up, you've got people ready to go. So. Chris, we've had a heap of different interesting conversations around almost at a different level, like the leadership role and the opportunity to catalyse the sector. I assume this is in the ICT sector too, Nathan. The opportunity to build people's skill sets and enable them to take ideas and commercialise those ideas, which is obviously a critical opportunity from an economic development perspective, and then kicking out new companies as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, the example I just gave where, you know, the Gold Coast can hang its hat now on the fact that it has invented a drug and taken that right the way through to now being available to patients in Australia. It's quite a remarkable achievement, but I guess within that and underlying that is, you know, what are the steps taken and what's the supply chain and the skill sets and the personnel required to actually deliver that? And that's a really important piece, because in that particular example, and I think for a big part, this is the way Australian technology often goes, is that we can develop, and we're really good at developing early technology, but then we see it going offshore. How can we develop great technology and keep it here in Australia for longer? And I think that's something that we're really focused on here. You know, we know that we can develop early stage technology, but how do we then build a workforce that's actually capable of taking that technology from those early stages through clinical development? Obviously, ultimately, when we go to market, these are global products, and so in a lot of cases, we do have to partner globally to make to bring those to market. But at least the development of those technologies, taking them through to a later stage here on the Gold Coast, is something that's key. And so within that, then there are opportunities for technology developers. I'm not talking about academic research and development staff here. I'm talking about people that can understand what it means to take an early stage technology and develop it through the manufacturing, regulatory and other preclinical development pathways with the view to take that into human clinical testing, with the view to take that ultimately to market. So definitely technology developers, and I know that applies to others here on the panel. But the other thing too, and something that's probably often overlooked, is that to bring all that together, those C-suite professionals, CEOs, COOs, and others in that realm, we don't have a big pool of those people here at the moment. I would like to acknowledge, though, that the great role that, and I can see Ariana sitting here now, Ariana, Ben Howe, what they're doing out of cohort to actually help train young aspiring companies and help train those new CEOs and COOs of tomorrow in driving those companies through. Things like that are going to help develop that. And there are other ways too where we can actually really foster the development of CEOs and COOs and other C-suite professionals here on the Gold Coast to make sure that we have enough personnel to help drive those technologies through those early stage development phases.
Yeah. What strategies as organisations or sectors do you see going forward that need to be employed to attract the workforce that you're going to need?
So what we're looking at across the tech sector is more than our own issues. So we obviously, we look to solve our problem first, but we also have other companies offshore and whatnot, which are growing pretty fast. And as a result of scaling up our own companies, so like, for example, we've got a software development company in the Philippines, and that's now about 180 staff. And part of our issue we had was the same thing, recruitment, upskilling, getting people job ready. So we've refined the pipeline there, and now what I'm doing is leveraging the pipeline and the infrastructure we've built to give people job skills and then replicating it here so we can scale and train up more than our own needs. We don't actually need a great deal of people personally for our company. The industry needs, and the tech industry and ICT sector needs skills. So we can solve a bigger, broader problem than our own, because I think sometimes what happens is we get stuck in the vertical that we're working in. So we look at our own company's problems, or we might look at our own niche within the industry's problem, but very seldom do we take a step back and say, well, how many other people have got exactly the same problem? What if we build a pipeline that's more lateral instead of vertical, and we can solve the problem of all the industry sector for skill shortage around tech and job placement and job readiness? And then that becomes a collaboration then with universities, colleges, schools. So even what we're working on at the moment is getting some of our accredited and not accredited courses, getting the QCE points, which is basically so it can get into high schools and become a subject at high school and count towards graduation. Because if we can reach down into grade 10, 11, 12, then we start filling that pipeline earlier. We can get more women into the space because as Stella mentioned before, I believe that 10% of the women keep going in these spaces, but they've got all the talent in the world. It's just that they lose interest somewhere along the line. And sometimes that's just about what you mentioned before about having that human touch, connecting with them earlier and saying, hey, there's a very clear path for you. You're great at this. You would fit right in, and giving a bit of confidence and building people up. And to the same point of oversupply of needs is not service your own need, not just worry about yourself. Be selfless. We've lost so many trainers for our courses, like where initially we had them employed and we lost them all, and we lost them to startups and other ventures, and every single time it's happened we're so grateful because that's an outcome of actually a result to us. And then the last thing, and I'm hogging the mic now, is the entrepreneurs get overlooked. And I think in order to fill jobs you need businesses. In order to have businesses you need entrepreneurs. In order to increase the number of entrepreneurs, you need to create supportive environments around that. All of the jobs only come as a result of having businesses to go to. And so I've been an entrepreneur, I've ridden the highs and lows of it, and it's a journey I'll be on for the rest of my life. I consider myself unemployable. Like even I have a hard time sometimes showing up to my own role, right? But the thing is we create stuff because entrepreneurs will go and break the mold, and we need more entrepreneurs. So don't be shy if you don't fit or you find people that don't fit. They're probably the entrepreneur that just needs a push. Support it, and then we'll have more businesses, we'll have more people. Easy.
Thanks, Nathan. And Nick, so what's Gilmour's strategy for you've got plenty to do, but you need more people to help you on the journey.
Yeah, that's right. We've actually talked about this quite a bit lately. I mean, I think I totally agree with what Nathan was saying about creating awareness that these opportunities exist very early on, as early as possible. I still talk to members of government that should know that Gilmour space is serious and has real hardware on the floor, and it's not until they walk into the factory and look at a massive rocket on the floor that they go, oh my gosh, this is real. And it's like, well, yes, like we've been telling you that. So if we have that much trouble with adults like trying to get through to a kid in Australia that the space industry that they've seen in the US is right here at home and they can be a part of it, and they don't necessarily have to be an aerospace engineer. Like we have aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, name all the flavors of engineer, and then spill into the rest of the business. Like I have an amazing human resources team, I have an amazing corporate operations team, the finance team is awesome. Like we just need hardworking, amazing people to be a part of the journey. So that's number one, is the awareness. And then now how do we get creative if people are aware to encourage them to the point that they're willing to put even just get their resume into the bucket? Because some of the feedback we've received lately is that our job position descriptions are intimidating. And so we've gone back to the drawing board and scratched out all of the Cert 4 in whatever the thing is, and really back to the fundamentals. We want a hardworking individual who is self-motivated, shows up to work on time, and delivers results when they're handed a shit sandwich. Like those are the people that we need, and I genuinely don't really care what their background is to an extent, right? We need fundamental capability and we can take it from there.
I think marketing of capability on the Gold Coast and promotion of pathways is something that just continues to come up all the time. Chris, what about the biomedical sector in terms of attracting the staff and workforce that we need?
Yeah, maybe I'll just speak about the Institute for Glycomics and our approach that we've taken, particularly to building those technology development skills here on the Gold Coast. So what our approach has been is to really train traditional academic research and developers in the commercial side of research and development. So how do you actually take a technology out of the laboratory and develop that through the manufacturing pathway, through regulatory, and ultimately to the clinic. And so the whole idea there, and coming back to your point, Shane, also Nathan, teaching unselfishly these people so they can go off and thrive, because one day we're going to get them back. And it's those people that are really keen and ambitious to take on something that's quite a little bit outside of their role today. They're the people that are going to come back and actually really help build the ecosystem. So our approach really is to try and educate in commercial technology development over and above your traditional academic R&D. So we've got that pipeline of technology developers that we can source here on the Gold Coast. The other two is how do we bring younger people along the pathway, particularly around entrepreneurism. And how do we educate and motivate them in that space? And we absolutely do that. We make sure that we bring our I wouldn't say they're younger staff or less mature staff, because they're at the management level now, but how do you educate them in the opportunity to potentially be outside the university in a startup and take an opportunity to drive a venture like that, perhaps with university technology. But that's kind of the way we're thinking now, is how can we take the next step and really think entrepreneurially about those C-suite professionals and how to develop them and promote them.
Great. Shay, I know you put a lot of thought into this every day.
I do, too much thought. There's so much going on. We mentioned the Gateway to Industry Schools program, which is another DESBERT program, and so that has a number of different sectors that it tackles, advanced manufacturing being one of them. And through that program, I'm one of the directors of the Queensland Manufacturing Institute who looks after the Gateway program for advanced manufacturing. We've got 50 schools across the state, and those schools have agreed to embed manufacturing in their curriculum. So So we've talked a little bit about that, about the QCE points associated with the manufacturing, well, with certificates, but we have those actually manufacturing certificates within schools that the kids can co-study in ATAR. They can be heading down a tertiary path or a vocational path in parallel now. So that's a new thing that ATAR has brought to the table. So you can have not decided in grade 10, and that's okay, and be studying a Cert 2 in manufacturing technology, as well as doing your physics and chemistry if you think you might want to do engineering, or you might want to proceed down the apprenticeship path. You can do both of those. So we're seeing actually quite a good increase in manufacturing pipeline through those programs. We're also seeing within industry setting up training academies, which is actually pretty cool. In some of our manufacturing, we've got a lot of skill shortages in metal fabrication, particularly machining, welding, those kinds of things. And so we're seeing businesses, and it's this altruistic view, right? It's this, I'm not doing it for me, but I know that there's a problem for my industry. We've got a manufacturer out in Toowoomba that set up a skills academy to pipeline skills into the industry for the region. So yes, it helps them, and yes, they get the cream of the crop out of their skills academy, but they're also supporting all the businesses around. But it's kind of like changing that mindset to say, right, I know I need the skills, and instead of poaching from old mate Bob down the road and we get into a wage war with each other, how do we raise the tide together and really create a bigger pool to bring from? So those are a couple of things that I'm seeing. Personally, I work with a lot of not-for-profits and do a lot of recruitment, and I've changed the way in which I recruit. I came from corporate land, and we have a very structured process, and there's all these ridiculous hoops that you make people jump through. And I just actually don't see the value in that. Nowadays, when I recruit, I have a quick 15-minute phone call and I introduce myself. I introduce what the company's about, what the purpose is, what the role is, and what we're really looking for, what the salary expectations are, what the culture's like, and really advertise the role and the position to the person and say, does this sound like it's going to be a good fit for you? Does this align with your values, with what you want to achieve in your life? Because if so, let's move forward. If not, it's okay for you to bow out now if you don't think it's going to work. So I think that more human approach, really, rather than being like, you need to tick my boxes to come into my company, it's more, I value you as a person and how can I contribute to your life goals?
A round of applause, please. Thank you.